Hello and welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast, and I am your host, Samuel. In this podcast, I interview top medical sales reps and leading medical sales executives across the entire country. And it doesn't matter what medical sales industry, from medical device to pharmaceutical to genetic testing to diagnostic lab, you name it. You will learn how to either break into the industry, be a top 5% performer within your role in sales, or climb the corporate ladder. Welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. Hello and welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. Today we have with us an Army Field Artillery Officer, and he goes by the name Steve West. This is an interesting episode because Steve gets into not just the transition from military life directly into medical sales life, because he made the immediate jump, but into his actual specific role. His role is a little unique because he is a clinical specialist. Now, a lot of you might know exactly what that is, but it looks a little different depending on the company you work for. But the major differentiation is a clinical specialist is typically not the same thing as a sales rep. Where a sales rep is focused on getting new business, a clinical specialist is focused on helping existing business. So he spends more time coaching providers in how to use the product as opposed to ever selling it. And with his unique product, it's actually very unique in the medical sales space because it's not a device. It's a hydrogel, and it's utilized to support radiation treatment. So I'm not going to spoil it. I'm going to save it for the interview. Take a listen. If you're someone that's interested in this kind of role, you definitely want to hear this. If you're a veteran, you definitely want to hear this. And if you just wonder what other type of products are out there in the medical sales space, then again, you want to hear this interview. Thank you again for listening to the Medical Sales Podcast. Hello, Steve. How are you today?
Good, man. How are you?
Hello, everyone. I'm good, and I'm very good. Hello, everyone. We have today with us Steve West. He is a veteran in medical sales. And Steve, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So my military history and why he, kind of alluded to me being a veteran. I was in the Army for about 6 years as a field artillery officer. And after that, I kind of made my transition and went straight into medical sales. Initially, I interviewed with a company called Augmenix, who primarily used one product or had one product called Space Ore. I'm still with that product, but a new company, Boston Scientific, is the company now. They bought out my previous company, Augmenix. And what I do basically with this product, I only have one product, like I said, is I'm a clinical sales specialist for that product. So not your typical sales manager or territory rep. I'm more in the clinical role where I'm doing case coverage, building and expanding utilization within accounts. And that's pretty much what I've been doing for the past year and a half since I got out.
Excellent. So when you say clinical specialist, why don't you help our audience understand what is the exact difference between an account sales rep and a clinical specialist?
Yeah, so I get asked this a lot from other veterans that are on their way out. They kind of see my success and what I've done and where I'm at, and they ask me, is sales for me? And I tell them, there's multiple ways to get into the industry. Sam, you know that for sure. But so my role specifically and the difference between a sales rep. So as the clinical, it's my role to kind of be there for the doctors in the procedures, their staff, teach them how to use our products, right? And then also within that account, expand utilization. So for instance, for my product alone, it deals primarily with prostate cancer patients. So for instance, if the doctor's only maybe placing Space Ore in about 3 out of his 5 prostate cancer patients, I want to get him to that 5, right? So it's more of like not necessarily an inside sales, but like like I said earlier, expanding the utilization of my product within an existing account. So on the flip side though, and the way that I explain it is for the territory manager or sales rep or whatever term, your company that you're pursuing kind of uses. It's all different. So the sales manager is bringing on new business. So they're out there doing the cold calls with the doctor, setting up appointments, getting doctors that aren't using my product or our product to start using it. So it's a little bit different. So I'm getting the doctors that are already using it to use it more, if acceptable. And then the other role, the sales manager, is just bringing on people that aren't doing it.
Got it. And how closely do you work with the sales manager and the sales rep?
Yeah, so the way that my company structured our product line is for the majority of territories, there's one sales manager and one clinical rep in each territory. Now, there are some territories that don't all have a clinical, but the majority of them do, for at least my product. And we work together pretty much day in, day out. It's extremely beneficial to have a team in the territory, one that's kind of, like I said, expanding that utilization. And, they're pretty much every day that they're doing a case, I'm in there with the doctors. So I'm getting that face-to-face with them, building that relationship, that rapport, which I think ultimately drives the success of any territory. And it also gives the sales manager the time of day to not necessarily focus on that, and he can go and focus on driving new business.
Right.
So I think having that dynamic is super important, and ultimately what has helped us get so successful.
Got it. So 2-man teams.
Yeah.
And what are the procedures? What are the typical common procedures that you said you attend these cases? What are these cases? What are the typical procedures?
Yeah. So for those that aren't really familiar with prostate cancer, there's basically 3 types of treatment. You can either get surgery where they remove the prostate. You can opt in to have radiation treatment where they radiate the prostate, or you can be what's considered put on active surveillance, where maybe a gentleman that's kind of older or maybe younger and it's not as severe of cancer, they might just say, hey, let's just watch it and see how it develops over time. We don't really need to take any further steps right now. So my product, SpaceOar, is primarily used with radiation treatment. And what it does is it's a hydrogel that's put in between the prostate and the anterior rectal wall, and it pushes that prostate up and away from that rectal wall. So whenever that prostate's getting radiation treatment, that rectal wall is pretty much safe. So it acts as a barrier to push that rectal wall away. So before SpaceOar, a lot of prostate patients have what's considered rectal toxicity. And, that's primarily why they have, maybe bleeding or, just some sort of lack of function in the sphincter maybe. So with my product, that's basically disregarded by all means. And so it's helped over 40,000 patients so far since we got FDA approval in 2015, and probably, hopefully, all of them that we can get in the future.
That's excellent. That's excellent.
Yeah.
And just to be really clear with the audience, so even though you're the clinical specialist, you're helping providers utilize this product, you're not actually attending any procedures.
No,
or you
so
are.
I'm not. Yeah, so medically certified, I'm not allowed to do the actual procedure, right? But with my expertise and knowledge of the procedure, I can teach and coach the doctors and his staff on how to make the procedure flow kind of easier, and maybe just even do it. Because a lot of these doctors, radiation oncologist is one of our call points, and the others is urologists. So urologists, they're obviously surgeons, right? They're used to using needles, poking people and all that. Radiation oncologists might not be, and that's okay. Just given their background, it's not as familiar to them to be kind of poking patients with stuff. So that's kind of where I come in to help, bridge that gap for those doctors. And some get it right on the ball, some don't, and that's all right. Everyone's different, but I'm there just to kind of help and be there as a patriot for them to kind of learn and do better.
Right. So. But what I'm getting at is it's not like you're in the room coaching. Oh, you are in the room coaching.
Yeah, I'm in the room.
Okay. So
I'm in the OR. I'm masked up. I got the hair. I got it all on.
Okay, so you're in the. That's what I meant by
the
attending
on the
procedure.
Table, they're there. Sometimes they're awake, and I'm talking to them.
Oh wow! So you're talking to patients.
Yeah. So my procedure can be done under local anesthesia, or it can be done under general. So sometimes the patients are awake. So.
Wow. Now,
Yeah, it's super interesting.
yeah, yeah.
It's also been a great way to connect with some older vets. There's a ton of, well, because I mean, Vietnam vets are around the age of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
prostate cancer range. And so it's been a great time getting to learn and meet new veterans in that
Oh,
sense.
that's fascinating. So you do,
Yeah.
I mean, do you develop relationships with these patients, or is it kind of a patients in, you're there for the procedure, you coach the
Mhm.
physician on utilizing this product, and then that's it.
Yeah, it's pretty much that's
In
it.
and out. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, my territory is basically all of Tennessee and a part of Mississippi, so it's hard to kind of keep contact with people that are in Memphis. They're all doing their own thing, and
Right.
so, but
Well,
it's
with
cool
that,
just to have that one talk with them at least.
yeah, and with that level of insight, I guess you get direct feedback on how
Hmm.
everything's going directly from the patient.
Oh yeah, yeah, almost immediately. Yeah, and from the doctor too, so it's really great.
That is excellent. That's an exciting role to have. So
Yeah.
what is the demand on that type of role? Is it pretty much 9 to 5? Are you working extra hours here and there? How does it look on a
Mhm.
typical day?
Yeah, so I would say it pretty much mirrors the sales manager or territory reps schedule, which, the majority of time sales reps have kind of their own schedule, right?
Right.
Um, so in that regard, yes, when I'm not doing case coverage, it's kind of on me to kind of go and visit accounts, make sure they have brochures, or if they need anything with marketing, or if I've set up something with marketing, if
Got it.
they're doing that, just kind of following up with all that stuff. So it's not necessarily a 9 to 5. It's pretty much me managing my own time.
Got it. And how often are you doing actual cases?
That really just depends. I would love to do them every day.
Every day.
For instance, this week I have cases Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Okay.
So I have none today and none Friday.
Okay.
Um, so it just changes depending on what the offices have. So.
Did COVID affect how often you can attend your cases, or is this something that's so necessary you still have to be there?
Yes and no. So I say yes because it definitely did affect our ability as a team, right? As the sales managers and the clinicals to be able to get into accounts outside of case coverage. Um, there are instances, however, and this is why I said no, where if there is a procedure and I need to be there, then I have to be there regardless of COVID. And so those are, obviously we've been taking all the precautions that everyone else is, and so far it's
Mhm.
been really great. I still love it because I get to get out of the house some.
Right, right.
So,
That's excellent. What an exciting role, Steve. All right, let's take it back to who Steve is now. So
mhm.
tell us, what got you into the military? What branch of the military are you in? How long were you there? Give us some of the lowdown on how that part of your career even came about.
Yeah. So I'll kind of take it back. I don't know if this is too far, but basically, I was a kid in high school, and I was wrestling at the time, and I was kind of put in a position where I had done well enough to kind of pursue college for the sport, and so based on that decision-making process, I kind of narrowed it down to West Point. So I went through the academy, and ultimately, I made that decision because I wanted to be in the military. Not as much now, obviously, but when I was a little kid, I mean, it's just every boy's dream to grow up, be a soldier, and go and fight and do all that stuff. And that was exactly what I was at 18, right?
Sure.
So I was all about it. And after going through the academy and being in the army for about 6 years, I ultimately decided that this wasn't the profession for me, and that's all right. I volunteered, I did my time, and
Right.
I'm super prideful of it, and I would do it all over in a heartbeat for sure. Um, but yeah, so in the army though, specifically, I was a field artillery officer.
Okay.
So howitzers, cannons, MLRS, stuff like that is what I was in charge of. But that's pretty much my history. Yeah.
Okay. And then how did you find out about medical sales?
So when you're in the military, the Army specifically has done a really good job about this stuff lately with helping soldiers transition out. I think they've actually changed their motto to, a soldier for life, where it was just an army of one. You probably heard that ringtone in the
I have heard of
background,
that.
but now I think it's Soldier for Life is the thing that they're pushing forward, and they've done a fantastic job. I think that's a great marketing plan for them, just as a little tidbit. But
Sure.
so with that motto in place, though, what they do is they play a very big role in helping veterans and soldiers that are transitioning out of the Army get put into placements. So I'm a little bit different than what the last guys we had on the panel podcast with Kyle. Kyle used one of the recruiter firms or recruiting firms, and I did too. But first and foremost, I went through a program called the Corporate Fellowship Program over here at Fort Campbell in Kentucky. And what this program does, the Army set it up to where you're pretty much your last 2 to 3 months of time in service, you get to go spend with an actual company in a corporate setting and kind of learn the ropes, kind of see what it's like not putting on a uniform every day,
Sure.
not doing the in and outs of, being a soldier every day. So I kind of got that transition and that aspect of it before actually going through a recruiting firm and ultimately ending up where I am today. But when I went through the recruiting firm, basically they set you up with these, not necessarily job fairs, but they bring all these other companies in that want to hire veterans specifically, and you just interview with them throughout the day. I mean, you'll have 5 interviews in one day. You'll wake up, go back and do another 5 interviews, 5 different companies. One of those companies happened to be Augmenix.
Got it.
And so ultimately, that's how I got to where I am.
That's
super
excellent.
Fortunate. Yeah.
That is excellent. So I'm sure you had perceptions before you joined Augmenix.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference between what you expected and what you're actually doing?
I would say my expectations were lower than what they should have been. I mean, I am just like so much more happy, and not that I wasn't happy in the military, but it's like I just thought it might be the same thing, but just corporate life, right?
Sure.
But it was far more than that. I mean, the team that I have now, my managers, everybody are fantastic people to work with. And, in the Army, you kind of get put in places and under people, under leadership and, working with peers. You don't really get to decide that. And you do. And I mean, ultimately, I don't necessarily, but I do in a sense because I'm free from like that contract of the military. But I, without a doubt, would choose these people through and through to work with every day. They're a great team. Boston Scientific is a fantastic company. I couldn't say a bad thing about any of them. And, it's been a pleasure to work with them. And like I said, I'm just super fortunate to be in the position I am, for sure.
That is excellent. Love to hear it. Okay, so tell us, what makes a successful clinical specialist in your role with your type of product working for your company? Give us the top 3 things that really make an effective, good top performer.
Yeah. So off the top of my head, I would say the top 3 things that pretty much in any role that you have, whether it's a clinical or a sales rep or anything, you have to have good time management. You have to be consistent. And that's not only just by showing up at procedures, but consistent with your communication with your accounts. You don't want to lose that relationship that you've built in your first, few interactions with them. So consistency, and then, confidence. I think confidence is key in any position. And overall, I would say, and I'm going to add a 4th one because it just came to me, but I was reading a sales book actually just recently. I can't remember the title, but the whole impetus of the book was talking about your attitude, and your attitude in sales is like the number one thing that's going to drive business.
Sure.
And so without a doubt, that I don't know why I didn't put that first, but that would be my first thing. You got to have a good attitude. If you don't have a good attitude when you go into an account, you're probably not going to get business with that account. I mean, that's just hands down, right?
No, that's just the reality of it.
If you don't have a good attitude when you go into a meeting with your manager, it's probably not going to be a good meeting. So that's just kind of my outlook on it. And that's kind of been my approach the past year and a half.
Sure. That's excellent. Okay. So with the clinical specialist role, as a sales rep, you're incentivized on making sales, right? As a sales manager, you're incentivized on your team making sales. How is a clinical specialist, for those that are curious about that type of career track, How are they incentivized?
Yeah, so the financial compensation and incentive is a little bit different than a sales rep, whereas my incentive financially is pretty much all salary, and there is a bonus.
Yep.
And that bonus is based on that variable comp that, your quota or that number.
Sure.
But so that's that part of it. The other part of it, and this is kind of why I lean back on the attitude portion of what I just said,
Sure.
is it's a self-motivating incentive, right? You have to want to get out there and do better for yourself and for your team to get that, bigger variable comp. And I think that's the most important thing for sure.
So it's almost like retaining businesses. That's your performance metric. How much business can we retain?
Yeah. So, I mean, because and this might be different for other companies and even product lines within Boston Scientific are a little bit different, but because I have a shared role and interest with my sales manager in my territory, our incentive is to meet the quota together, right? So if that's him bringing on new business or me just expanding business within accounts we already have, we're trying to get to that same common goal.
Got it.
If that kind of makes a little bit more sense.
That does make sense. Okay. Give us some of the challenges, if any, give us some of the challenges of coming from the military and getting into a medical sales role. I would assume there are challenges of just going from military life to civilian life. Any challenges that you've particularly dealt with getting into your role or that you've experienced within your role?
Yeah, I think one specifically for medical sales is that time management and just a change of life, basically. In the military, you have a very regiment lifestyle. Every day is, kind of planned out for you, or you're planning for someone else. You kind of have that timestamp of what you're doing throughout the day for basically the entire year. Sure. Right? You kind of know when those training exercises are coming up, when you got to go to the range, when you got to do PT, all of that. And as I've mentioned, in a sales role or even a clinical role, that's all up to you, right? You have to drive your own business. And I think it might be intimidating at first, but I think the skills and values that the Army instills in individuals and veterans specifically make them more successful in that type of role. And they might not know that. And I didn't know that, right? Sure. I had no idea, I was going to like medical sales or the clinical role. But I love it. And I love that ability and that freedom to kind of do what I need to do and get it done the way I want to get it done. Right. And my manager's done a fantastic job of allowing me to do so. So I think that was probably one of the biggest challenges. And then, just some minor things is just getting used to talking to people. It sounds easy, but it's not. I mean, you I just think back to times as a captain where I'm talking to like a colonel or a general, and I'm just like locked up, frozen, and when I first got into this role, I remember talking to the doctors and just kind of like, lock it up like, oh God, these guys are like, they're going to make me do push-ups or something. I don't know.
Right.
And so just getting over that, those initial fears and just out of your comfort zone a little bit and just kind of open up your personality and just be human. I mean, that's the best thing about it. And overall, just have a good attitude. I think
that is excellent. That is so excellent. One thing that we talked about during the panel that we're talking about again now is, you said that a veteran might come into this space and not realize how good a skill set they have for discipline to set their own schedule and get things done. Right?
Yeah. And even to elaborate on that, I think Kyle brought it up in the panel where, specifically because me and Kyle were both field artillery officers. And in that role, one of our objectives or, one of the things that we had to do pretty much every training exercise was try to convince our maneuver commander to use and utilize the field artillery, right? So it's basically, we're doing a sales pitch to him. He might just be a battalion commander, but we're trying to convince him and sell him to use our product or, in this sense, artillery in his operations. So you just got to step back and kind of look at what you've done in your military career and kind of bridge that gap again and figure out, is this something I want to pursue, and how can I basically translate this experience into from the military into this role. And
Right.
you'll find that you can do that without a doubt. Whatever you did in the military, there are things that you can pinpoint and kind of figure out and expand upon when you're interviewing and trying to pursue a career in medical sales.
That's excellent. One other thing that was talked about last time we were all together was
Mm-hmm.
how everything is a mission, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in sales, we have those client accounts that they're just challenging. Like we're going to get the business, but they're giving us every obstacle to get the business. Would you say that you've been able to handle those type of challenges any differently, or you've had more success than others with a difficult customer and being able to turn them into an actual customer for your business?
Yeah, yes and no. I would say, just going back to what I kind of labeled as my top 3+1 things.
Sure.
Consistency. I think that's super natural for a veteran, either Army, Navy, whatever your background is, to want to keep pushing forward and accomplish a mission, like you were saying. And I think that drive and that motivating factor helps you build business. And at first, I remember my first time going into a cold call with a doctor. My sales manager was like, "Hey, you're already over in that area. Why don't you go into his office and just see if you can get some time with him?" I was
Right.
like, "Well, do we have a meeting with him? Like, do we do it? Like just freaking out. Like,
Right.
I don't know how to talk to this guy. Am I going to have to stand at attention? And so facing that fear and just kind of pushing through that barrier and talking to him. I met that gatekeeper at the front, and she was like, "Oh, he doesn't have time." And I'm like, "Look, blah, 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 blah," just giving her my spiel. And she's like, "Okay, well, let me go check." And then I got 30 minutes with him, 30 minutes with a
Nice.
doctor. I mean, that
Nice.
doesn't seem like a lot of time, but it was a ton of time.
No, that's
I
a
got
lot
to
of time.
basically
Yeah.
go through the entire sales thing. So it's like that consistency and that attitude and that approach to it. The values of the Army and what they instill in you as a veteran can absolutely help you in that situation and many more in that career. And
That's
so I
excellent.
think it's just extremely valuable to have veterans in your organization. I think most people know that by now.
That's excellent.
So,
Excellent. Excellent. So for the future then, Steve,
mhm.
where do you see yourself? And I'm talking 5 years out. Is leadership something you look towards? Have you found the sweet spot and you just want to stay in this role and ride it out? Where do you kind of see things?
Yeah, so for me personally, I would love to eventually get into a managerial role. Not necessarily the sales manager role or sales rep role, but the one above it. So like a regional manager,
Sure.
territory,
Hmm.
VP of a region, anything. I
Sure.
mean, I think that's my goal, right? I want to be over people and lead them. And that's kind of going back to why I initially even joined the Army. I love leading people. I love being in charge of people. I love managing people, being there for them, being someone that they can talk to. And I think ultimately just seeing them grow as individuals, right?
That's excellent.
And so that's where I want to be 100%.
Excellent. So then going back to right before you joined, with all the wisdom you have gained now, what would you tell yourself right before you started?
Right before I started, you talking about medical?
Medical sales.
Okay, yeah. I would tell myself to get over the fear and push forward. I could go on and on about all these different instances where, I was sitting in my car waiting to go into a doctor's office, just trying to think of exactly what to tell them to get them to buy my product, right? But you could do that all day, just sit there and be anxious. And if you just get in there, be human, like I said, have a good attitude, get over that fear and just push in there, you're going to do well. And I wish I would have known that earlier in my career, because there's plenty of times, and I'm not going to lie, where I just sat in my car. I was like, okay, should I go in there? I'm going to tell this front desk lady this, and she's going to be like, no. And I'm like, okay, what about this? Just playing it all out in my head. But if I just go in there and like I did, eventually they're like, okay, yeah, you can talk to him. It's just, you got to get over the fear and drive on. So I would
Excellent.
say absolutely 100%. Just tell myself to just drive on and push forward.
Excellent. And then the last thing I'll say, when it comes to veterans that want to enter the industry, do you think it's valuable for them to look into any kind of services that would help them develop their interviewing skills, develop how they communicate, develop the reason why they want to get into the roles they want to get into?
100%. Um, we touched on it briefly where you can find and pinpoint those things that you've done in the military and translate those into a sales category or role or whatever you want to call it. And I think having a program or some sort of person to lean on and train you and coach you in that manner to get to that point that knows the industry and how to translate that knowledge and experience without a doubt would be super helpful. And then as well as just interviewing. I mean, I've never had to interview for any position I had in the military. And, it's not an easy thing to kind of sell yourself, right? Without having any sales experience.
Right.
So I think having, a coach in your corner, without a doubt, I would have 100% every single time I interviewed. Even if I was to change jobs now, I would probably go back and reach out to some of the people that helped me get this one and ask them, hey, how do I do this again? I think it's always great to have a coach in your corner.
That is excellent. Any last thing you want to share with our audience before we wrap up today?
No, I mean, we touched on it last time. I'm a huge advocate for veterans. And if you want to reach out to me, Samuel has my contact. You can reach out to him, get in contact with me if you have any questions about my background, my experience, or even just how I ended up in this role. We kind of touched on it in the podcast, but if you have any last questions, just feel free to reach out. I'm always open to talk to veterans or anyone for that matter.
Excellent. Thank you so much for the time, Steve. And we'll look forward to keeping up with you and seeing what the future brings.
Awesome. Thanks, Sam.
All right. Take care. What I liked about that episode is how Steve went into facing the fear, right? We talked about values. We talked about what makes a good rep. And a lot of things come up that we've heard before. Good time management, having a good attitude, being very, very consistent. I mean, these are values that, of course, you learn in the military. And they're values that really, just to be a good professional, you definitely want to be practicing. But really staring fear in the face and pushing through to make things happen and really get some results within your territory. I think that's something that we really got to remember, right? I'm sure in the military, that is, they're facing fear all the time, from the way they're trained to the actual real life experiences. And to be able to take that attitude into this role within the medical device sales space, it's critical to success, because you're going to face difficult customers all the time. You're going to face challenging environments all the time. I mean, think about the environment we're in right now. What better time to face the fear of whatever you think might not work and actually go for it to make something happen. Another thing that I really like that we talked about is how in the military he had to sell to his field artillery officer, sell their plan on what they want to do. And he takes that same thought process into his role in the medical device sales space. It's a unique role that Steve's doing because it's not a device, right? It's medical device sales with a company that specializes in medical devices, but it's not a device. It's hydrogel that's used to assist in radiation therapy for the prostate. So it's good to know that these types of roles exist, because you might be someone that's saying, you know what, I'm in medical device and I'd like to be doing something like that, or I'm not in this space, but this sounds interesting. And now you know that there's actually opportunities out there where you can do something like this. On top of that, we got to see the difference between what it really means to be a clinical specialist and a sales rep. Now, in all honesty, a lot of companies call their sales reps clinical specialists, but with that being said, there are companies, especially in the medical device sales space, that really make that differentiation, where the sales rep is, like Steve said, they're getting new business, and the clinical specialist is there to assist existing business. So they're spending all their time coaching providers in how to utilize these products as opposed to doing anything else. And again, it sounds like a very exciting role. I mean, he's there. He's in the OR. He's in scrubs, and he's ready to, for lack of a better phrase, get his hands dirty, but he's actually coaching the utilization of this product. This was a great episode. Steve was a great guy to have on the show. And again, it goes to show that when it comes to medical sales, you can come from almost any field And if you do the work and if you find the right resources, there's a way to get an opportunity in this space and really make things happen. Which, of course, makes me want to remind you that if you're someone that's listening to this episode right now and you're thinking about getting into the medical sales space, and again, that means medical devices, pharmaceuticals, biotech, molecular testing, genetic testing, all of the above, and you want to get into a space like that, you want to commit yourself to a career where you're serving others, and those others being patients, and you're helping providers have better patient outcomes and helping patients get a better quality of life, then you need to make sure you visit Evolve Your Success and attain a medical sales role. There, you're going to have an opportunity to take an assessment that's going to give you some true insight into what you're doing to actually make some things happen, and the opportunity to have a conversation with us to talk about a real resource that can get you to where you want to go. And by that, I'm talking about the Medical Sales Career Builder. That's a program that we have that is designed to help anyone from any field close the gap between being, I don't know how I would even get into a medical sales position, to, wow, I have a medical sales position. And this is not just for people that want to get into the industry. This is for people that are also in the industry. I mean, think about it. Some of you have been in your role for the last 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years and haven't had to even think about interviewing anywhere. And some of you have not wanted to think about interviewing anywhere. But for whatever reason, you find yourself in a situation where it's now time to interview. And you're wondering, you know what? I don't even remember what goes on my resume, or how to answer these questions, or how to truly communicate my value, or what is my LinkedIn page? What should that look like? I mean, you have all these questions that this resource that we've developed, the Medical Sales Career Builder, answers to the T, and has been so successful for so many people that have either wanted to transition to a different role or get into the space to begin with. So if that's you, make sure you visit evolveyoursuccess.com and select Attain a Medical Sales Role. And if you're someone that wants to improve your performance, you've thought about how you want to close customers better. You've thought about how you want to get better access to the customers in your territory, especially in these difficult times. Or you've thought about how you want to make some changes within your role or within your career on where you want to go and what you want to be 2, 3, 4, 5 years out. Go to evolveyoursuccess.com and select Improve Sales Performance. Again, we appreciate all of you that have decided to say, you know what, this Wednesday, I'm going to listen to another episode to get some more insight, because this is why we do it. So make sure you tune in next week for another episode. And thank you for listening to the Medical Sales Podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And remember, I have a couple programs that show you exactly how to break into the medical sales industry, become a top-performing medical sales professional, and also how to masterfully navigate your career to executive level leadership. Check out these programs and learn more at evolveyoursuccess.com. Stay tuned for more awesome content with amazing interviews.